So then, in total there's basically 25 stages to this game, as well as 5 bonus stages. And each F5 basically had like, a fairly good like, solid base to them. But some F5 could be improved a little bit, so I figured we'd drop some thoughts basically about like each of the individual stages and how I basically play through them, and like, how I think they could be improved and stuff like that. So let's just get to it. I'm not basically gonna use Lance's guide here because he of course basically had like pictures for like each of the different maps, so it gives a little bit more of a breakdown of like what to sort of like see in this map. So I'll use this as sort of like a reference here. So anyway, anyhow, I'll note for the first stage of the game, I thought it was basically well done. You basically have like a house down here you can basically loot. You basically have like appearing enemies that basically appear from the bushes. You have like a small amount of like troops, like nothing like too bad for like what is basically to come. So overall, starting the game out, I thought stage 1 was like done really well, and I wouldn't change this for like anything basically. It's just like it's done well, it works for what it is, doesn't need to be changed. Now that said, moving on to stage 2, I do believe there could be some changes basically done for this one. So, just to throw it out there, I'm not really a big fan of like any map where like it's basically possible for like the player to sort of like abuse the enemies in any sort of way. And this is really like one of those maps where like you can really like, do so, because over here you basically have like this bridge over here that's basically like linked to like these troops that like don't move at all. Like these like the nomad, these like troops here, the armor like lancer, this guy over here. And overall, what I would probably basically do for like this mission here is make it so that like you basically have to sort of like advance quickly if you might want to like get to like the loot basically up here or like stuff like that. So here's basically like some thoughts basically for this mission, and it's also like an everything basically as well. So actually, let's like don't note the everything first. So there's actually 2 things I really don't like about this like this stage here for like stage 2. One is the fact that basically these troops over here, they don't move if if you're like running past them and stuff like that. They really should be like set to like engage you like the other troops. The other problem I basically have is Vega over here. So let's just talk about him. So I want to note that in this game, and very much in Partia 2 as well, I'm not really a big fan of any like sort of game that basically gives you like troops to play with, and immediately takes them away like later on down the road. And Vega and this man are basically very much in that like sort of role where like you get to play with them in this mission in this stage, basically stage 2, and a stage after, stage 3. But then he basically turns on you and basically he becomes your enemy. And I actually very much think that like stuff that should have been done here is actually make like Vega basically like an ally, like sort of like force. And the you character basically starts with him, should have been allied with him as well. I imagine like how does it work basically. Basically what should have happened, I think, basically like the player takes a turn to like run up here, of course, to do some stuff, maybe like enter his house or like engage some force over here. But on like a sort of an ally turn, basically what would happen, I think, is like it could be that like Vega basically immediately orders like you to basically move out into like this house, and he basically moves into his house like as ordered and like enters it. Vega actually orders you to actually kill the guy inside, and you actually kill him. And that basically sort of like sets up sort of like a little bit of like sort of backstory between like you and like Vega, and how like he basically came to join you. Basically like you is sort of like his over there Vega, I guess, and like what should have been done, I think, is like you should sort of run into the house, kill the guy, and like in the following like cutscenes, I guess, he would have been going to Alexa and be like I want to be over like under like your direct command or instead of like Vega. So it's like Alexa's like okay, and like he just takes you under his command as opposed to like leave him under Vega there. And that'd be like sort of like an idea there, like to sort of like make like you basically sort of like have a little bit more backstory than like he just like was just over here in Vega like at one point, and then like he like joins your army like fully like in the next like turning point, so to speak. Now I know basically one of the reasons for like suggesting having like you and like Vega being allied over here. The thing about like them is that if they're really basically allied, they can like push up and display direction over here, and basically they can like sort of like cut off the bridge basically by themselves. And the idea is like you could like just sort of stay down there and like sort of like hang out, and not get killed or anything. And Vega and his men could like run up here to like block off the bridge basically for you. And I can see this being like sort of like an idea where like he's like Vega's like actually smart like to actually cut off the escape route, so like they can't escape. Now, here's something else as well that could be a note by the way. Vega could actually be like, a little bit more active basically than like his like, men. So Vega could be like, going out to like storm like these villages basically up here and like, trying to like raid them before like you get to him as well. And if you basically raids them, then he gets loot for himself, and like, you don't get anything basically for it. So there's actually some incentive for you to move quickly for this mission. Like if you let like Vega basically get to the houses, he's gonna basically like, take the stuff from you. So do you want to do that? Also, do you want basically to engage Hode and possibly kill him off? And like, maybe you actually kill off Hode or like Crowsplay if Vega could. And if he kills them off, then like, they're not available at that point basically. So you actually have some incentive basically to like, get ahead of Vega there. Alternatively, you could actually just have like this sort of state of bridge, and like, that's his role with like his men right there. So he basically gets up to the bridge, like stops like the enemies from like, crossing over, and like, that's just his job. He's just a blocker. But the thing here is like, there's basically two improvements. Basically, one is like, it should have been like, Vega basically could have been like an allied soldier as opposed to like being under command, and he should have basically like programmed like, go up here, like, block off the bridge, and then that'd be that. The other thing that these like units here, they should have been set to be like hostile as opposed to what they basically were. So if basically like, you get like, up here, this guy should be like hostile to you. If you get up to these guys, they should be hostile to you, etc., etc. And probably as well, like, I probably also have a trigger where like, if you kill like 5 troops, that should be enough to trigger these guys to run away, or even like, 4 freeze. So like, they say like your guys coming and like, they're like breaking through, and it's like, we've got to run away at this point. Alright, that's enough talk about like stage 2 here. Let's move on to stage 3. Alright, stage 3, the foggy map. Now, I think that stage 3 is actually a pretty like, I really much like the sort of dynamics of this, like this map, where like, we see like sort of like the strategy of like, Lux is basically on like, display here. Like, he basically hides like the ambush and like, unleashes it on upon like, Heinz here basically to kill him. I'll note again that I think that like, you should have had like, Vega be like sort of allied to you at this point, and basically what you should have done with like, with like Vega here, you probably should like, move basically up here maybe to like, help like guard like the like, the enemies basically coming to you. Or like he could be like, it's like, very much like, a haphazard character just like runs out like crazy, and it's like, tries to smash up everything impossible, and it's like, gets like knocked back by Heinz space eventually. So that's something else that you could have done with like him. But overall, I think for the most part that like, this is a well-done mission, but the main problem I basically had with it is just like, basically like, you still have to like, worry about Vega being like, he's basically under your command, and you're gonna lose him basically in the next like, stage. I'll note the other thing I probably note probably to sort of change here. It'd probably be like, either have like less like troops basically under Heinz command, or at the same time you could like have like more like defensive like cover basically over here for your troops over here. Like I could imagine basically you could have like, like maybe a couple like more trees basically down the path over here that has to like sort of cross through, or maybe as well like you could like give like the players like some more like, troops basically under your command to like make use of. But for the most part, like, it's fairly done well. I'm not really gonna complain about it. It's done well enough, so whatever. Just like, the only real thing I like changed to be like Vega for the most part. Make him like allied, make him perhaps like, charge out to like do stuff, etc. Alright, so Flight from a Tribune. Leave it as is, basically, because I think this is pretty much well done for what it basically has to offer you. I think for the most part, like, the thing like this one here is basically all like collecting items and run away, and like, for the most part, I think like it's basically done like well enough. So leave it as is. Let's move on. Alright, Dark Princess. I want to note that I think Dark Princess was basically one of those missions that I really disliked, because I saw no point for having all these like ballistas basically everywhere. Here's the thing about the ballistas basically in this game. I don't like really hate them, but at the same time, I really despise like the fact that they have like that like chance to like sort of one-shot your characters if you're not careful. And it really has to do with like with the range basically more than anything else, because the thing about these ballistas basically is that like they don't really have like so much like great accuracy or anything like that, but against like a weaker character, like they're gonna like it's like just cut through them like butter, so to speak. And the only thing I would basically change for this map would be like to have like sort of less ballistas basically. So what I'd probably do here, I'd probably make it so, like, maybe there's, like, a ballista basically over here. Maybe there's, like, a ballista, like, over here firing at the caravan. But, you're basically, like, not really, like, having to, like, sort of worry about these guys as much. In hindsight, what I probably would suggest is you probably should learn this mission to like, have, like, say, 3 ballistas at most. And they should be, like, sort of, like, around, like, the caravan, I think, for the most part, as opposed to you. And that's just basically how I would have changed this mission, basically, for the most part. I think, for the most part, the idea of, like, these, like, this mission here is fine. I think it's a good idea to have, like, sort of, like, people, like, run around, like, trying to, like, engage you, or, engage, like, the caravan. I think it'd be fine having, like, a couple ballistas, basically, to, like, just sort of be introduced in this, like, chapter. But, for the most part, like, there's, like, too many ballistas, and that's to be, like, the only thing I'm really complaining about. It's, like, there's, like, too much ballistas to, like, deal with. So, lots of those would have been, like, fine, I think, for this mission. And then we get to the Lorable Atm Stage. I really like this stage. There's only, like, one thing we really know is that, in fact, there's, there's, like, that bug basically with, like, the castle up here, where, like, if you basically kill off this soldier and he's, like, the last guy right, like, on the map, then, like, you can just win, and there's like no cutscene for, like, you gain, like, the 30,000, like, gold. In hindsight, I think that, like, that's, like, the only real problem is with the stage. You basically have access to, like, basically all you really need to, like, really explore this map and do whatever you want to it. So this is, like, my favorite stage, likely my favorite stage in this game, because there's, like, there's a lot basically to do. You have, like, 4 different enemies come from four different directions. Awesome stage, basically, for the most part. It's good basically as it is for the most part. So let's carry on. And then we get the prison break. Alright, so first thing first, again, there's too many ballistas. And here's the thing about this mission, basically. It's like, it makes sense to just be well guarded with, like, ballistas and stuff like that. But, you're basically starting off right next to ballistas, basically, like, near the gate here. And that's, like, I think the main problem here. What I really would suggest for this mission here, probably leave, like, these 4 ballistas basically right here. Maybe leave, like, these couple ballistas up here, but get rid of ballistas basically down here. And the idea here is, like, it probably wouldn't make sense to have, like, some, like, ballistas on the front gate here, maybe, like, a couple basically into, like, the guard, like, the, like, the sort of, like, I guess we'll call it, like, the prison, like, citadel itself. And here's the thing. The thing about the ballistas is that they're not a bad unit. It's just that they're, like, so prone to basically killing off, like, your weak units that they're a problem. And it would have been better, I think, if, like, they're there, but they're just less there, so to speak. So, basically have, like, less ballistas, I think it's, like, the takeaway from it here. Now, don't bother, like, after, like, the stage, ballistas aren't that much of an issue because you'll have access to the arena, and with the arena you can actually train up your troops so that they, like, you don't get one-shot by ballistas. So it becomes less of an issue from this point on, but, earlier on, less ballistas would have been, like, a good idea for, like, these, like, this mission here, as well as, like, stage 5. Alright, March on Grana. I think for the most part, this mission is fine, basically, as is. It basically, like, sort of, like, shows off, like, basically, like, Alexis is running through, like, the map and, like, getting ambushed and stuff like that. For the most part, I think it's done fine. I don't think you really need to change anything, so let's just move on. Alright, so we got the Fading Light. So, in the mission where, like, Cam's basically, like, having to escape from, like, the occultists here, I think this is a pretty well done map for, like, what it basically is. Do I want to suggest changing anything? I don't think I really do. So, let's just move on. Alright, so, capture Nassau. So, first things first, I want to note that I really like this idea for this map here, where you basically have, like, 2 separate squads. But at the same time, I think it would be a lot better if, like, you could actually, like, deploy, like, your units basically on, like, the field itself, as opposed to having to, like, go through deployment map basically and, like, sort of figure out, like, how to deploy your troops from there. I think for the most part, like, this mission was, like, done, like, well enough for, like, what you basically had for, like, at your disposal. Again, I really don't like having all these, like, ballistas basically over here you have to deal with because, ballistas, but, again, at the same time, at this point, you should actually have had time to, like, sort of train up your, like, guys, so it's not that big of an issue. I will note, however, that there is one thing to note, by the way, and, like, that's, like, all civilians basically on the map. And I have to say, I really don't like the idea of, like, this map having, like, civilians basically on it to begin with, because Alexis sort of, like, is portrayed as, like, this guy who doesn't go around killing civilians, basically. So having civilians basically on the map that you can basically kill sort of, like, runs, like, counter, like, to like, Alexis' philosophy. So it probably would have been a better idea to, like, have it so, like, Alexis basically is, like, running through this map, and, like, the civilians are sort of, like, allied to you, but they're not like, sort of enemies, basically, like the enemies, so to speak. How would I probably do it? If it was possible, I'd probably say, like, you need to have, like, say, a neutral faction basically in this game. And the idea is, like, you can't really attack the neutrals, but not necessarily, like, enemies of you, or, like, enemies of, like, the enemies, so to speak. They're just there. And the civilians could be, like, sort of get in the way, maybe, but, they're not basically there to be directly attacked, basically, so that's what I have to say about it. This sort of concept where you basically have, like, killing civilians to get their items, by the way, this could have worked a lot better basically later on if, like, you're basically in, like, the Kingdom of Ultra, or, like, you're basically, like, maybe attacking, like, an Ultra in, like, colony somewhere, but, not really here, so to speak. That's the only thing I have to, like, say about it. Like, the only real problem with this mission is that it's like, thematically, it's, like, it's bad, so that's all I can really say about it. I probably would remove the civilians, and, like, just have so you can have, like, divide, like, forces basically on, like, two different sides. Alright, free the hostages. There's no map because this is basically a dark map, so there's nothing really here. But they give me sort of, like, my thoughts basically, like, going through this mission. I think there should be more emphasis on basically rescuing the hostages as opposed to, like, essentially, like, just killing everything. So honestly, there should be, like, a succeed condition if you basically rescue the hostages. But at the same time, do I think it's probably a bad idea that you can actually have, like, the option to kill all enemies, basically, and, like, just leave the hostages there until, like, you're ready to, like, to rescue them, so to speak. I don't think that's, like, necessarily a bad idea if you want to sort of, like, play it that way, I guess. So it's, like, it's sort of fine basically as is. Now, there's something basically note about this mission, by the way, and that's, like, is, like, your first mission is, like, a dark map as well as, like, an inside map. I probably should, like, state this as well, but, something you should probably actually do probably in the future games. If you're inside, like, a certain installation, you should really be able to use, like, dragoons or, like, cavalry to, like, move around inside, I think. So it makes sense that, like, the neighbor who basically, like, pops in this mission, for example, is basically unmounted because she's in, like, a building, basically. She's not, like, able to really use her dragoon. And I would really suggest, basically, for, like, the future, if you're gonna, like, have, like, these, like, installation maps, basically, like, everyone should be, like, forced to be dismounted basically from the get-go, and they can't mount up. The second thing to note, by the way, is about the torches. And I actually think it would be a good idea to have sort of, like, introduce, like, sort of a torch mechanic where, like, if you have, like, a torch, it basically lights up your units and makes them, like, vulnerable to being attacked, but at the same time, basically, like, lights up their surroundings so you can actually see what's around them. And basically what I suggest doing, basically, like, the torches, make it so, like, if, like, an enemy or, like, you're holding a torch, everyone can basically see that you're in an attack at will, basically, so to speak. But everyone else, they can't be attacked. That would, like, be, like, the only real thing I basically would say here about, like, the torches, basically. The thing about, like, my game experience, by the way, I'm very much the type of player that, like, likes it when, like, the enemy basically, like, follows the same rule set as you. So basically, like, if I'm in a dark map, I expect that the enemy's gonna have a harder time basically seeing me as I see them, and they can't, like, come up and, like, attack me out of the dark just, like, like nothing. They should be, like, able to, like, be penalized somewhat, basically. Unless they have some sort of special skill, like, say, like, the thieves, for example, that, let's actually see stuff around them a little bit better. Maybe I actually make, like, in the future, like, a skill called Dark Vision, for example, that, like, basically, like, makes it so, like, the units can basically see perfectly in, like, their field of view. That'd be, like, an idea basically to pursue, but, whatever. Basically, for free hostages, like, the only real, like, problems I basically have is, like, and my, like, headset cut out there, but, the only real problem I basically have, like, free hostages here is the fact that, like, you basically, like, have, like, mounted units basically run around inside an installation, and the fact that, like, the enemies really aren't following, like, the same, like, rule set basically as your, like, guys, so that'd be something I'd probably, like, aim to fix basically in, like, the, like, following games basically as a result, but whatever. Alright, so, Alien Mountains. For most part, I think this, like, mission is, like, done this well enough. It basically introduces us to, like, the goblin units and, like, the idea of, like, sort of unending waves of them basically popping up from the stairs. I think for the most part, this mission is done well enough, so let's just push on. Alright, so, saving Karn. Alright, so I think this is like a good like, you know, map to sort of like introduce us to like the Black Guard guys. And well, here's some thoughts to this mission. So I'll note by the way that like, you know, this mission here, I think it would have been a lot better if like they had like sort of like, you know, well, what can I say about it? I think there's like a couple of like things that could be improved for this mission, and like the fact that like, you know, it should be like a lower turn counter before like those paladins basically show up from down here, and you probably should not have been able to destroy bridges basically in this mission because there's like no real point to it. But basically, like, you know, I probably would note by the way that like, you know, this siege, by the way, I think that like it should have been that like, you know, after like a certain amount of like enemies basically get killed, they probably should try to run away at some point. So basically, like there should be like sort of like, you know, much like similar to like stage 2, a sort of death counter where the enemies will basically figure out like, you know, we can't actually win the siege anymore. We should just probably flee and pull it off. So I probably like suggest like in the future, like, you know, this sort of map here. This is like a proper map where like the enemies really should be fleeing because they should actually figure out like, you know, we can actually flee and we're gonna lose. So let's flee. And like, you know, this would be like where it should really be like applied. And that very much like, you know, runs into like, you know, this mission here very much as well. Basically like, you know, this mission here where like the guys get disorganized and flee when you basically kill off the general. For the most part, I very much like this sort of setup where like, you know, these guys don't actually come out to engage you because they actually sort of like stay in formation and stuff like that. And I like the idea like, you know, if you kill a general, basically it causes them all to flee. So, you know, I'll say like overall, this is like a really good mission, basically like, right here to like sort of like, you know, throw out here. There's actually something I should probably note about at this point, by the way. Something to note about this game, it'd probably be a good idea that in the future when we basically have like these like sort of like leader characters, like, you know, the general over here. Horse should actually have like some sort of background, basically like, you know, in his description. Like he actually should like write a summary from it that actually says like, you know, why is he actually the general of like this army. So he just could be like, you know, a lieutenant basically under like, you know, Hilt's command basically, or like Aldebaran's command. And that should be like sort of specify like who this basically guy is that you're basically fighting here. But that's like the only real complaint basically have for like, you know, stage like, you know, 12 here. Is just the fact that like, you know, this guy's basically unnamed. Other than that, this is like a really good stage and nothing really should be changed about it. Alright, Shadow of the Holy City is basically another like dark map. Again, this should be a map where like, you know, you shouldn't really have like, you know, not the characters being able to run around like sort of like a palace and stuff like that. And it's also another like, you know, a map with like, you know, torches like, you know, being like an issue, or the fact that enemies can be attacking you while like, you know, you can't attack them and stuff like that. But other than that, I think this is like a fairly good one. So leave this like, you know, one it basically is for most part. And then we get to stage 13. Now, I think that stage 13 was actually a really great like, you know, sort of like map basically to play. And I actually really like the idea of like being able to break bridges to like, you know, sort of like delay enemies and stuff like that. I will note, however, that I think it would have made a lot more sense to basically have a lot more pirates basically from like the Trishu, because, you know, they are sort of like the pirate faction in this game, and you don't get to really see a lot of pirates basically like, you know, outside like this mission like in the Burning Sea that comes after. So the only real thing I would actually suggest about this one is that there should have been more pirates, and really other than that, that's like, you know, all there really is to it. This is like a really good mission to like, you know, basically play and like, you know, do you save the villagers, do you not save the villagers, etc, etc. Burning Sea, again, more pirates would have been nice to basically see, but other than that, this is like a great stage, so let's just press on. Alright, so, stage 15. I like stage 15. I really do. But, I would probably suggest that in the future, like, you know, what can I say, suggest about it? I'll note basically like, you know, the main problem I have with this mission is basically Aldebaran basically appearing basically. Because, if you basically follow along my YouTube, like, you know, recordings like, you know, this far, you know that I actually killed Aldebaran in this stage. And I really don't think Aldebaran should have been, like, you know, killable at this point of the game, because obviously if you kill him, then, like, you know, that's basically like, you know, you just defeated him. Why is he basically appearing later on in the game? And I very much think, like, you know, what I probably would have done here, by the way, I would have actually changed it so if like Aldebaran basically appears, he'd be very much like, say, like Vega, where like if you defeat him, he'll be like, I'll see you guys next time, so to speak. And he'll just drop his sword, and like, you know, he'll like acquire that sword perhaps later on down the road. We basically, like, you know, have to sort of hold him off at Starfall Gorge. But for the most part, like, you know, this is like a good stage basically outside of that. But yeah, Alta Baron could have been, like, you know, done a lot better, I think. That was like the only real, like, you know, letdown for this mission. Alright, so Tropic Forest. Now, I will note that Tropic Forest is actually a very good, like, you know, map basically to have, like, you know, map the units basically on, because it makes sense that they'd be able to move around a little bit. Basically because they're in, like, the open, like, you know, jungle, so to speak, as opposed to being, like, you know, in an installation. I would probably note that I think that, like, you know, for this map, again, like, you want to basically have it so, like, you know, the torches are, like, you know, able to light up people a little bit better and stuff like that. But it makes sense basically that, like, you know, that, like, the wild people can, like, run through the forest, like, very easily to attack you and stuff like that. So this is actually a fairly good mission. It's just, like, you know, the only real problem is, like, you know, the torch basically thing, like, you know, being able to see it. I mean, like, you know, is, like, you know, a thing in this one where, like, you know, this would have been again, like, a good mission where, like, you know, if you can actually see, like, the enemy with, like, a torch and, like, you know, attack them, that'd be a lot greater, I think. Actually, I'm not really sure what to say about the Tropic Forest. It probably is just fine as is, so probably just leave it as is. Alright, Gate of Luan. I will note that I think this mission is, like, you know, one where, like, you know, it doesn't really make sense that you basically have, like, you know, sort of reinforcements popping up for Teuton. I think maybe, like, after, like, a turn, maybe, basically it might be okay if they pop up and sort of, like, you know, help out, and, like, he has, like, you know, maybe, like, a little, like, you know, blurb basically saying, intruders. Quickly, gotta more men to stop him, so to speak. But for the most part, this is like a fine stage that basically as is, and like, you know, introduce you to Shia, so whatever. Alright, Ancient Rite. I like this mission. Basically introduces us to a giant. Basically has like enemies spawning in to, like, you know, attack us if we, like, you know, let them. It's fine basically as is. I like the fact that you get to rescue a character if you want to here. Alright, so, Queen Elvira. Now, I like the fact that this is basically a well-lit map, basically, because, like, you know, it's inside a palace, and, like, you know, you should be able to, like, you know, basically, like, sort of, like, see around here a little bit. Again, I don't like the fact that you're able to use, like, mountain units basically in here, though this would actually make a little bit more sense for this one, because there's basically giant units running around, and, like, you know, the giant units maybe, like, you know, they actually require, like, the space to actually run around, so maybe you could fit a horse in here. But, you know, other than that, like, you know, it's another, like, installation mission where, like, you know, it's well lit and stuff like that, so this is probably one of a few times I'll basically say, like, you know, it is fine as is this installation map, so leave it at be, so move on. Alright, so, Desert Storm. Now, I actually really much, like, you know, like the idea of, like, you know, this being a map that sort of slows down your troops, but I think it would have been a lot better if, like, they had, it's, like, you know, maybe, like, the enemies in this map were, like, a little bit more, like, you know, organized, I think, to fight you. This map basically reminds me of, like, you know, Stage 5, like, you know, with, like, all the scouting units around, like, you know, you have to sort of engage them, and they don't, the only real difference is that they don't really engage you, but, it probably would have made more sense, I think, to actually have it so, like, you know, maybe, like, the mages were, like, all grouped up together to be, like, you know, sort of like a cohesive force, and maybe, like, so, same, like, with the nomads and, like, the Khan, but, other than that, this map's pretty good, like, you know, as, like, sort of like a, you know, we're on our way to, like, you know, hit out the, like, you know, for the free cities, let's go, like, you know, take them out, blah, blah. Alright, so, Majesty Jahina. So, this is, like, the first map where we get to buy stuff. Like, you know, really buy stuff from, like, stores basically in the game. I have to say that I think this is probably, like, you know, a fairly, like, good set for, like, how, like, this map's basically set up, but at the same time, what can I say about it? I like the idea of there being, like, basically shops in this game you can basically buy stuff from, but at the same time, I think that, like, you know, at this point of the game, it's not really that, like, you know, beneficial to you. It's beneficial basically to buy dark spells since you don't get access to those, like, later on in the game, but, everything else here, like the jewelry and stuff like that, is, like, you know, you're probably gonna be, like, you know, like this, like, you know, if you play the game like this, like I did basically, you'll be swimming in it, even if, like, you know, you didn't kill civilians. But for the most part, I think this map is basically fine, basically as is. So leave it basically as is. And there is actually something to say about, like, you know, having shops basically like this far in. I will say basically about Partia 2, by the way, is like, you know, when I was basically playing Partia 2, you had like shops very early, and like, you know, that meant you couldn't actually buy stuff, and a lot of stuff you couldn't buy would be like, you know, skill scrolls and stuff like that as well. So it was really, really good stuff you'd be like, you know, you'd be like missing out on and stuff like that. But well, I have to say that, you know, for Partia 3, basically at this point you're like, you know, you have access to like a lot of stuff in like the Mage City here, and you know, it's basically all stuff basically you can like buy like later on, like the fire spells and like, you know, the ice spells and stuff like that. And the only real difference is basically those dark spells basically right there. So it probably would have been a good idea if like, you know, have more shots basically later on Partia 3 to like, you know, sort of mix it up and like the player have to think like, you know, what am I going to buy or what am I going to like, you know, leave behind. But this is like a little bit too late in the game to like, you know, for it to really matter. Like this is like a good stage basically to sort of, I guess, like, you know, stock up on stuff basically, so it's fine basically as is, but you know, it probably would have been a good idea to have like more shots basically later on, like, you know, earlier on basically in the game to like, you know, basically buy from, as opposed to like later on right now. But whatever. Alright, so Glenn's Pursuit. This is an excellent map. I like the idea, like, you know, of like the zombies sort of like pouring out of the zombie circle, so you have to like, you know, sort of like pile through, and like, you know, Glenn being down here to sort of like deal with. And I like the fact that like Glenn basically is able to like sort of like, you know, meteor like, you know, strike you out of like the shadows, because it sort of like makes him like a lot more like of a boss battle, so to speak. Like, you know, he's like the hidden boss you have to go and find, like, you know, and take out. So it's like a really excellent like sort of like, you know, fight here. I will say, by the way, that like, you know, Partia 2, of course, basically had like the Archmage and stuff like, you know, is all over the place in the darkness, but you know, this really works well as a boss fight here, so it was well done. So good on you, developer. All right, Paphaguina. This map's basically fine for what it basically is. You have a little outpost you can like sort of hold up in. Then you have like this exit over here. I probably actually made it so like the exit was a little bit more accessible, because you know, this could be a little bit wider, I think, over here to like get out of like the map. Like I probably would have had like, you know, exit arrows basically all the way up here for example, all the way down to there if you want to. But overall, I think this map was basically like, you know, done well enough. So if you want to basically guard yourself, you can. I wouldn't advise like, you know, exiting the map, but you know, you can, I guess, if you want to. Alright, Highland Fortress, the first like siege map. I like the idea of like ladders in this game, but I think at this point, like, you know, introducing them was like sort of like, you know, a little bit too late to really be barbed with. The idea of like having like sort of like the ladders, this would have been like you know, something probably I would have like introduced like earlier on in like the game, like, you know, maybe around like the stage like 13 or 14 of like, you know, Pretton or Kren. But it's like, it's an okay map mechanic, and like, you know, it basically like is an okay map, I guess, for the most part. But you know, this map really felt like very filler to me, so to speak. And here's the thing. In my guide, basically, like, you know, I can actually show this off right here. One of the things I actually like note is that, you know, if you want to like to sort of skip this map, you can, right? So let's go to Highland Fortress here and preview the guide. But basically, the thing here is like, you know, if you really want to like sort of skip this like map, all you have to do is basically warp something and basically use a warp stuff all the way over to General Connaught, who is kill him that way. So this is very much like a map that feels like very skippable, because there's not really like a whole lot happening to it. So this is like sort of a map I would have liked a lot earlier on, I think, than like later on like this. But you know, whatever. You know, you just get through it, just move on, I guess. So whatever. Here's the thing, I guess. It probably would make more sense to have like a fortress basically you have to go through like earlier on, and like, you know, there should have been like no defenses basically toward like, you know, altar base from the north, I guess. So that's like really all I can say. All right, Starfall Gorge. I very much like this map. I like the idea of like, you know, having like sort of like a stationary character you can't move, and like, you know, having like enemies sort of like, you know, barrel down on you. I think it could have been done a little bit better of like, you know, sort of like the positioning of the enemies. Like, it probably would make more sense to have this like, you know, enemies basically spawn all over the place from like the up here in northeast, as opposed to like just being in this corner, because that sort of like encourages you to sort of like spawn camp them. But other than that, this is like a fairly like, you know, good stage for what it basically is. Excellent stage basically to like, you know, play through. Alright, so stage 24. Probably the only thing I really need to know about the stage is that, like, you know, if you basically like avoid like, you know, ignite like this like, you know, these reeds over here, it doesn't actually like, you know, work right the map basically after that point. Basically, like, you know, if you want to, you can actually kill off all the paladins basically after they charge you, and he'll basically just sort of like, you know, sort of stand there. what it really should be, by the way, in this game, is like, you know, once the pilot basically engages with, like, you know, Alexis, and if he hasn't basically known the trap, he'll really basically send his troops basically down to, like, you know, basically like, stop you at that point. And I think it would have been a lot better to actually do, because basically, like, you know, you could have, like, say, like, all the pilots basically come down and attack you, and then, like, he starts deploying, like, his, like, you know, his, like, troops down here, and, like, you know, Alexis could actually use that as a good point to, like, you know, ignite the fire, so to speak, if he wants to basically burn, like, you know, help to a crisp. I also think it would have made more sense, basically, to have it, so, like, you know, help. It's basically smart to, like, run away, basically, if, like, all his paladins are killed. So, if, like, you know, you come down, like, all his paladins, and you just run through him like nothing, and, like, he'll basically left with his troops up here, he should probably realize at this point that, like, you know, he's not going to win because he is a genius, and he should probably just, like, you know, back off and be like, you know, where's Altibaron, and, like, try and form up with him. But of course, he's basically going to be, like, you know, hunted down with detail basically in the following cutscene, so that'd be, like, fine. But, you know, well, no, you know what? This is here's this like this like map. This is the penultimate map, and I really expected a lot more from it. And I really didn't, like, you know, find like it was all that fun. Basically, like, you know, you have like high-powered paladins over here. You have, like, you know, a lot of troops over here, but for the most part, this like map was, like, you know, sort of a letdown to me. I really expected like some like grand like fight between like childhood friends, so to speak. But, you know, in the end, basically, it's like, you know, Alexis basically using his tactics to, like, to overwhelm, like, these, like, you know, troops here, and that's basically all it was, basically, for the most part. All right, finally, the final fight. So I want to note that for the final fight, I actually thought this was like a great like map to sort of like play through, but at the same time, I think it could have been like done a lot better. I probably would have made it so like these archers over here, as well as the Queen's Guard, will actually start moving out once you, like, you know, you get to a certain point. So here's the thing: once you basically get past like these, like, you know, these troops from Arrow to Katrina, like, down, you really, like, can sort of pick off these guys one by one, and it would have been made more sense, I think, that, like, you know, once these guys can sort of like see you, that they basically start to, like, you know, all like move to engage you, I think, at that point. So that's like something I would have done to, like, basically improve this. So, like, you know, saying this is like his map is a little more, like, you know, frightening to you. But other than that, I think the map, like, works just fine. So it's good that basically as is. And at this point, we're basically done with the stages here. So that's basically sort of like a breakdown, like, you know, running through all the stages and, like, you know, what I basically thought about them. So yeah, hope you guys basically enjoyed that. Now, I will have like one more video basically after this, but for now, that's basically for the stages. Hope you guys enjoy it and take care.